Listen, Rick to Rick, he's got the weapon plans. Nip this in the bud.
You are a little different though, Rick. Maybe I can use that someday. Seriously though, don't come after me. It won't go well.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Rick and Morty Season 7 Episode 5 video. There were a whole bunch of storylines and Easter eggs that they paid off, like long-running plots and more recent stuff from like Rick Prime and Evil Morty. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. We're only like halfway through the season, so there's still like a bunch of WTF stuff that they'll probably save for the actual season finale. Careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet. We'll start at the beginning, work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs, WTF moments, starting with the episode title, Unmort Rickon, which is a reference to the Clint Eastwood Western movie Unforgiven, which itself is a revisionist movie that upends a lot of the stereotypical Western movie tropes up to the point that that movie came out about that black and white nature of absolute good, always triumphing over evil in a lot of classic Western movies. Basically painting things in a more morally gray brush, where terrible people sometimes do good things and vice versa, and it's meant to be a more direct reference to the Evil Morty and C-137 Rick story arc, where again, they did this during Season 5. They portray Evil Morty as doing more heroic things like helping Rick, but also while he's doing that, he comments sarcastically about how he's not called Nice Morty or Good Morty for a reason. Like he's honest about being more morally ambiguous, yet winds up helping Rick capture and kill Rick Prime. He even implies at the end of the episode that he might ask for Rick's help in the future again, like they might team up again in a future episode. And during the episode, Rick on his side of things also treats Evil Morty with a certain measure of respect. Generally, the episode tries to continue to reinforce the idea that inside the Rick and Morty multiverse, there's no such thing as someone who is completely good or completely evil. Everyone is just shades of gray. Maybe not Slow Mobius though. RIP, everyone pour one out for Slow Mobius. Just in terms of big movie story parodies for the episode, just overall kind of turns into like a Saw parody with the Cube movies, which is also a bit of like a horror sci-fi franchise and kind of a trap-based conceit crossed with Battle Royale and the Unforgiven movie itself. Basically with the purpose of paying off the saga of Rick trying to find and kill Rick Prime, the Rick who killed his wife Diane and his original Beth when he was younger, basically causing the series of events that turned him into the version of C-137 Rick that we saw at the beginning of Season 1. Also at the end of the episode asking the question, who is Rick if he is not trying to avenge his dead wife? Like, what is his life going to be going forward now? Like, what is his grand purpose now that Rick Prime is dead? Funny enough, Evil Morty also kind of acknowledges that he went through this same kind of arc after he escaped the Central Finite Curve. Like, he also implies that he finds his life kind of meaningless and empty now. Like, what do you do now that you've achieved your goal? To be fair though, Dan Harmon did say that Rick and Morty could continue kind of like The Simpsons forever. I don't think that will happen, like it won't continue forever, but they're supposedly making a Rick and Morty movie now. We know it's going to go to at least 10 seasons, so like there's a ton more actual story, so I'm sure they'll have some funny way of referencing that by episode 6. Like, yeah, this big emotional moment for Rick at the end of the episode, but you have to remember a lot of times they'll do the one-off episodes right after the canonical episodes, where it seems like the characters kind of get their emotions reset a little bit. Like they might briefly acknowledge some of the trauma they experienced in the previous episode, but they're mostly back to normal, like a lot of non-serialized television. Generally, this episode was super canonical, wrapping up a number of major storylines, some not totally wrapping up the Rick Prime saga at least. That's been going on in the background since Season 3. It did not totally wrap up the Evil Morty saga, like I said. It really only brought him back temporarily, leaving at the end of the episode with a teaser that nobody should come looking for him, but he might need Rick because he's different in the future. Like, I might use that in the future, implying that they'll team up again. Maybe not till like Season 8 or something like that. They don't bring Evil Morty back many times within the same season. At least not anymore. They also used the episode to pay off a lot of the teasers about what the wider multiverse looks like, what happened to Evil Morty after he used the yellow portal fluid and did a tour of the wider multiverse, which is kind of like the Wild West compared to the much more tame-looking dimensions in the Central Finite Curve that we usually see week to week on the show. Like, it gets super crazy beyond the Central Finite Curve. The actual opening scene is basically the entire full backstory of Evil Morty. They also confirm a lot of theories during this that people had about his backstory that started after he debuted back in Season 1. So a lot of these fan theories actually went way back like 10 years ago at this point. That's how long ago it was. They show that evil Morty started out as just like a regular Morty who got sick of his Rick abusing him during their adventures. Notice that the final mission that they went on before he rebelled against him was to get more crystals, which is sort of a callback to the earlier this season when they revealed C-137 Rick had the main Morty dealing crystals for him on the side for what seemed like a while. I think they just want to suggest that potentially this main Morty is also getting close to that breaking point that evil Morty did. Like at any moment, he could actually just be pushed over the edge. Inside their garage, for the most part, everything looks very similar to what it did in the first couple seasons of Rick and Morty. Like they want it to seem very, very similar to the main version of Rick and Morty that we've been seeing this whole time. This Rick also has the same kind of secret fridge that they have in all their garages we saw earlier this season. He's got some kind of dodecahedron that says do not open until X. I'm not sure what's inside it. You can post your theories about that in the comments below. He's got the same floating eyeball and that green fluid that we saw in our Rick's fridge earlier this season. Same brand of beer, but the whole idea is that evil Morty is trying to get him drunk so that he can hijack and take over his body, basically. Evil Morty's bedroom is pretty much the same as our Morty's bedroom. He's making the eye patch device that he wore, allowing him to remotely control his Rick, then basically executes his plan, taking over his mind, controlling his body. Notice when he goes to actually execute the plan, this Rick also repeats the 100 years rant from earlier on the show.
Rick and Morty and their adventures, Morty. Rick and Morty forever and forever, 100 years. Rick and Morty some things. It's you and me, Morty. Rick and Morty, 100 years, forever.
Yeah, pal. Rick and Morty. 100 years.
They travel to the Citadel of Ricks and begin slowly constructing that device that we saw them using during Season 1, slowly going around capturing more Mortys to power his field, hiding their base. Going through a lot of the different Ricks, too. They started the Morty Agency because that's a business at the Citadel designed to help Ricks get new Mortys, a callback to Rick's free replacement Morty that they offered him during Season 1. Evil Morty looks like he's mostly collecting the disaffected Mortys first, like the most unhappy Mortys, probably because they're easier for him to get away from their Ricks as opposed to the happy ones who'd be more likely to try and stop him. The reason why he's erasing the file of this unhappy Morty, or the ones that he steals, is because he doesn't want there to be records of them inside the Citadel's system. He doesn't want people to come looking for them. Then they basically replay the events of Season 1, Episode 10, the very first Evil Morty episode, adding a few new scenes, some new context to those events from Evil Morty's perspective. They go to a bunch of other realities while they're collecting different Mortys and different Ricks. This is a reference to Prince's Purple Rain. Like this whole dimension is a Purple Rain dimension where they all dress like Prince does during that album. Even their stuff is purple. The dog Snuffles is dressed like Prince too. On the wall, the picture of the Corvette is a reference to Prince's song, Little Red Corvette. Notice they're also eating spaghetti, like they have the same spaghetti nice that we saw earlier on the show. This family hasn't discovered that the spaghetti is actually made of people. In the next reality, Snuffles is dressed like that one picture of The Rock with the turtleneck and chain. Everyone in this reality are wearing turtleneck versions of their clothes. Like this entire universe is based on that Rock meme. They show how evil Morty's Rick continue to try and break free of his control and kill himself, eventually welcoming the Mortys at the facility, rebelling and killing him because he wants to be free of evil Morty, even if it means his death. They show that at the end of that episode, evil Morty was rescued by one of the council members at the Citadel of Ricks. We saw him sitting on the council later in the episode, who gives evil Morty council member robes, making it seem like evil Morty had been working with someone on the inside of the council with members secretly before this, probably helping him execute his plans, hijacking, stealing all these different Mortys and Ricks. So it sounds like he was able to convince some of the council members to turn on the rest of the council. They show what happened to him after the end of Season 1. He just went to the Citadel and lived a quiet life until they started having elections again, and we basically see the events of Season 3, Episode 7. Remember, his whole Citadel takeover plan was just a ruse he orchestrated in order to gain access to the control chamber for the Central Finite Curve, allowing him to escape it. He didn't care about ruling over the Citadel, he didn't really care about anything that was happening in the Central Finite Curve, he just wanted to escape. They replay the events of Season 5 when he did escape, blowing up the Central Finite Curve containment device. He didn't blow up the curve itself, he just blew up the barrier, preventing people from leaving the Central Finite Curve. Then this is one of the few episodes that you'll notice that skips the regular longer intro and just plays the title screen. Then they basically show what happened to him on the other side of that yellow portal after the events of Season 5. Part of the idea with his portals being yellow is that they're made from the blood of Ricks, like it has something to do with Rick's DNA. I think the idea is that the green portals are just meant to work within the Central Finite Curve. The yellow portals and all the other colored portals that we see later in the episode are for wilder space outside the Central Finite Curve. And they basically reveal the wider multiverse outside the central finite curve is just chaotic space with no semblance of any kind of order. All the main characters exist, but in vastly different forms. Like, there's still versions of Ricks, and the family still exists, but they're very different as opposed to the alternate versions we see inside the central finite curve, where they all kind of look similar. There's a bunch of different colors of portal fluids, different shapes of portals. There's a bunch of open wormholes like the ones we saw previously on the show, naturally occurring wormholes between dimensions. They also explained Rick is to blame for some of these as he's searching for Rick Prime, starting to merge different dimensions, also affecting the fabric of reality in doing so. These versions of the family that kill each other with different portals seem like parodies of the Jetsons, and Evil Morty reveals that he's currently on a mission to get some special type of crystal from this monster to power his bunker device, like the shield around his giant bunker. It's basically like an island in space that he's been living at for the past couple of years, meant to be kind of like a paradise oasis, kind of like Thanos' garden planet at the end of Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Notice that he travels back into the central finite curve to get to his oasis planet. Most of the aliens, the monsters we encounter throughout this part of the episode are brand new, with a few exceptions like this monster we saw previously on the show. I think his robot at this planet here is meant to be a parody of the Jetsons' Butler robot, just because we saw Jetsons parodies earlier in the episode. And the whole idea here is that what Rick is doing, basically fracking the multiverse, looking for Rick Prime, is affecting his shield here, causing it to be breached by all these monsters, these other asteroids. And that's ultimately why he winds up helping Rick, because he wants to get back to his quiet alone time, and he feels like if he helps Rick achieve his goal of finding Rick Prime, then he'll stop messing with the wider multiverse, stop affecting reality this way, and he'll be left alone. So essentially, Evil Morty is doing this because he wants peace and quiet, not because he wants to actually help Rick and do something good. I'm not sure what this spaceship is meant to be a reference to. It looks like it's from either a video game or another movie. If you think you know, write it below in the comments. But I love that Rick created a massive spaceship. Look, this looks huge and really complicated just for combining all these different dimensions, like merging different dimensions looking for Rick Prime. Notice on his monitor, there's the same depiction of the central finite curve because Rick Prime is in the central finite curve. Morty mentions the sub-basement from previous episodes. We visited again a couple times in this episode. Rick even shuts it down at the end of the episode too. They explain the basic mechanics of how he's searching for Rick Prime, basically grabbing all the versions of Rick Prime that are close to him or copies of him, but it's actually Evil Morty who shows up and helps him perfect the device, implying that he's smarter than C-137 Rick and smarter than Rick Prime. There are a couple moments like that during the episode too, where he references being smarter than them. Notice he references the events of Pickle Rick. Rick also jokes that the events of the Season 5 finale made him a fan of Evil Morty. I think that's also meant to be a meta reference to the episode in real life because it was super popular with the fans. Like, Season 4 was not that popular in terms of seasons overall. Season 5 finale wound up being super popular. They capture Rick Prime's final decoy, which is a trap designed to capture anyone who got too close to him. This is where the episode turns into like the Saw parody mixed with the Cube and the Battle Royale parodies, all trying to escape the different chambers while trying to be the last man standing. Some of these other Ricks here are just generic parodies, but one of these seems like a James Bond British Rick. This one they call a nice Rick, who's only polite and honest about doing terrible things, like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to kill you, but I'm going to be nice and tell you about it. This one is obviously a very direct Indiana Jones Rick parody. Rick Prime basically confirms that he killed C-137 Rick's wife Diane out of pure spite because he felt like Rick was acting superior to him. And he also engineered a device to kill all of Rick's wives across the wider multiverse, explaining why we've never actually seen a version of Rick's wife alive in present day. That's been a question that fans have had since season 1, like, how come we've never seen Rick's wife? Is there a version out there? The answer now is no. To be fair, Rick Prime kept like body parts from her he used to make cyborgs to mess with other Ricks that he captured, but it's not his actual wife being back alive. They also confirmed the long-running fan theory that Rick based the voice of his AI Garage and his ship's voice on his wife's voice. At the end of the episode, Rick Prime also references this idea. They sound exactly alike. She sounds just like our wife. A lot of fans basically said the same thing after Season 3, Episode 1, like, wow, his ship sounds exactly like Rick's wife.
I heard sci-fi noises. Did you make a breakthrough?
Sort of.
They imply C-137 Rick is an inferior Rick with the Omega device name, like only inferior Ricks know about it, and he's like, well, I heard about it from another Rick. Yes, that's the reason why I learned about it. Later in the episode, though, Rick Prime basically says that the two of them are like the peak Ricks, like the Rickest versions of Rick across the entire multiverse, because they're the only two that originally came up with portal devices. meaning every other version of Rick in the multiverse either got the technology from them or from another Rick who got it from them. They kind of referenced this phenomenon when they did the backstory for Rick in Season 6 and showed that he originally helped create the Citadel of Ricks, so a bunch of those Ricks probably got the technology from him. Then they start the Battle Royale parody, pitting them against each other. C-137 Rick is correct that Rick Prime is lying about giving them Diane back because she's a cyborg designed to mess with them. They also reveal that Evil Morty has upgraded his body like Rick with Inspector Gadget-like weapons built into his body. We see a bunch of those weapons later in the episode too. The whole idea too is that he's meant to be the Rickest version of Morty. So that's why so much of him is so similar to Rick. That's why they feel like they're the same, and Evil Morty also references this phenomenon at the end of the episode. He also briefly jokes that the main Morty is more evil than him when he tries to double-cross him. And I love the joke about the turds and pizzas and how it confuses Morty. Like, it's just meant to be a random joke that Morty just gets really hung up on. Like, how are turds like pizzas? Dan Harmon said in real life that a lot of this happened at like fan conventions the first couple of seasons. Like, they'd have really weird one-off jokes that fans would get really hung up on. The cyborg jokes about Rick sucking at eating Tang and his junk being super smelly, he also makes it sound like those aren't lies. Like, oh, how dare you reveal that? When they come back to the sub-basement lair, if it wasn't clear, this Rick in stasis behind them is a version that he was using to try and track Rick Prime. That's the reason why it's gone at the end of the episode when he shuts the lab down. He doesn't need to track him anymore because he killed him, so he doesn't need the extra copy, and he has separate backup copies of himself on different levels of the sub-basement. Notice when he pulls up the more accurate map looking for Rick Prime, he's using his butts to track him. That's a reference back to the Season 6 episode where you see the version of the test tube shaking his bare ass at him. This is meant to be a map of the specific dimension where real Rick Prime's weapon is located. Then he confirms where he keeps his ship inside the house when you don't see it up in the garage. Evil Morty explains that he's afraid of Rick actually succeeding in his goal of killing Rick Prime and then becoming so depressed because his life has no meaning and trying to end all existence because his life has no purpose anymore, so why does anything matter? So ultimately, he wants to tail Rick, not out of a desire to help him, but to prevent him from doing something worse if he actually succeeds, and because he wants the plans for the Omega weapon. When they mention Rick killing himself, he actually tried to do something similar to what Rick Prime did, killing all the versions of himself across the multiverse during Season 2 after the original Unity episode. Dan Harmon and the writers explained that this device was powered by portal fluid designed to sync up every version of Rick from across the multiverse and kill all of them at the same time because he was so depressed. But he got drunk, it missed his head, so he survived. That's what Rick Prime meant earlier when he said that when he creates something, it actually works correctly. Because he created a similar device to kill all the different Dianes, and it actually worked. Then this whole sequence with Rick Prime's larger weapon feels like a parody of a video game, but I can't remember which one. Let me know in the comments if you think you know what all these characters are references to in this giant sphere. It almost feels kind of like Halo or Mass Effect, something similar to that. The reason why Rick Prime is like Rick but with free time is because he doesn't have a family with him. They revealed that C-137 Rick is known across the multiverse as Dead Wife Rick. Like all the Ricks have some moniker like Indiana Jones Rick, this one is Dead Wife Rick. Then the first member of the family that Rick Prime kills is Slow Mobius, who was last featured during Rick See Business. He's canonically Rick's uncle, and he's a Time Lord with the ability to slow time, which they make a couple of jokes about. He's kind of meant to be a Doctor Who parody, as in the Time Lords. They also reference his wife to set up the post-credit scene, and they explain that the device erases them from existence when it gets used, so that his family almost forgets that he ever existed, only remembering him because of the pictures they have of him. That's why his wife gets the tattoos of him, so that she won't forget. Their big Inspector Gadget fight gets really crazy, like it turns into like a giant video game kind of fight, but stopping the bullets is more of a Matrix reference. They remind you Rick Prime has a healing factor, kind of like Wolverine and Deadpool, but there are limits, like eventually they break them when he's not able to heal the damage that they do to him. They reveal Evil Morty's eye patch device can also read people's brains and warn him early about attacks that are coming before they happen. The Kuato Rick is a Total Recall reference, and the reason why Evil Morty's eye patch can't scan Kuato Rick's brain is a joke about Kuato during the Total Recall movie having a really powerful mind. They confirmed that C-137 Morty is Rick Prime's original Morty, which they also revealed back during Season 6 when they were kind of setting up this whole backstory, retelling the story about how C-137 Rick actually came from another reality originally, and Rick Prime is actually the original C-137 Rick. This Rick just moved in to his family's home. That's how they explained the backstory, with Beth saying that you just disappeared for a bunch of my life and then showed up one day. Because he didn't show up, it was the Rick who had his family killed showing up and living in Rick Prime's house. But remember, the C-137 dimension, that version of the family was from the Cronenberg dimension. They already moved dimensions multiple times, settling with different versions of the family since then. There's a quick joke about the Mortys switching shirts when Evil Morty swapped places with them, but in reality, they wear the exact same shirt, so it shouldn't matter which shirt that they wear. Evil Morty kills all of Rick Prime's backup body so that he can't hop bodies again, steals the plans for the Omega device, and notice the code name for the device is Booker AIDS V2, which is a callback to Morty's Mind Lords and all the random file names Rick gives to everything. Evil Morty implies again that he's smarter than all the Ricks when he says that he'd be the Batman to Rick Prime's Robin if they were to team up. He saves C-137 Rick's life so that he can finish dealing with Rick Prime, kill him, thus stopping Rick from messing with reality so that Evil Morty can find some actual solitude and peace without having to be interrupted by more of Rick's grander, crazier plans. Remember, that was the real reason for helping him do this, so that he could find some more peace. Like, stop messing with reality so that I can just chill out on my garden planet. Rick beats Rick Prime to death, and the way they treat it in the episode, like Evil Morty mentions it, they want it to seem like he's permadead. But then they reference Rick feeling empty inside, like his life no longer has any purpose. Evil Morty implies that he went through a similar type of effect after Season 5. Like, what do you do with your life now that you've achieved your grand goal? A couple more big WTF revelations too. Rick Prime implies that had he not been the one to kill Rick's family, Rick would have eventually been the one to do it to his family. Like I said, the idea is that they're meant to be like the two Rickest versions of Rick. Now, because he's dead, C-137 Rick is officially the Rickest Rick. When Evil Morty says he can end the Rick experiment anytime he wants, he's just implying that he's smarter, more powerful than all the Ricks and thinks of their continued existence kind of like a grand social experiment, like you are only surviving because I haven't used this multiverse device to erase you yet. He also explains why he's not going to use it, because he wants to use it as more of a deterrent, and he's worried that a bunch of the Summers would retaliate against him. Not that Morty would retaliate, like he's not worried about any of the Mortys coming after him, he's more worried about Summers just because Summer is so unhinged. Then like I said, when he talks about Rick being a different kind of Rick, and he might be able to use that someday, that's just a teaser that Evil Morty might ask him to team up with him again and help him in the future. Then a lot of you probably recognize the song that plays here. It's Look Down from the Bridge from Rick Potion number 9, and Rick's stare with the camera zooming out on his face is a callback to Morty doing the same thing in that original episode right after they got done burying their bodies for the first time in the backyard. It was right after they had moved on from Cronenberg dimension to a new dimension. Rick is also kind of having the same existential crisis that Morty was having during that episode, like, what does my life mean now? What do I do with myself? So at least for now, he's kind of living in a zombie-like state. Like I said, the next episode, episode 6, feels like it's going to be a non-canonical, like a one-off episode, so he'll feel more like regular Rick during that episode. But as he's going around the house while the song is playing, he sees Spacebeth is back, and during the post-credit scene, they pay off the slow Mobius death. Basically, his wife goes through the same events that Rick went through after his family was killed, pretty much all the exact same scenes up to the point where they're at the bar. But she meets another version of someone going through the same thing, and they get together working past their grief instead of doing what Rick did, eventually living a happy life together with both of their families becoming one. Much healthier ending to the same backstory that Rick got. Notice her tattoo says never slow because Slow Mobius's powers were slowing time down, and basically her spaceship is like a clock-themed version of Rick's ship. There were so many Easter eggs, references, storylines they paid off in the episode. If there are any that you spotted that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. And let me know, what do you think they're saving for the actual season finale if they did an episode this big midway through the season? My full Rick and Morty Season 7 Episode 6 video will post next week after they release it. There's a bunch of big stuff coming up. We're in the middle of Invincible Season 2 episodes. It is awesome. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss any of those. Click here for all my Loki Season 2 videos, and click here for all my Rick and Morty episodes. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.